The smell hit you before you even walked through those double doors. That warm rush of cinnamon from the pretzel stand mixed with new sneaker rubber and fountain chlorine. In the 1980s, the American shopping mall was not just a place to buy things. It was where you spent your Saturdays, where you met your friends, where you burned through hours you would never get back. Every single one of those malls had stores that felt permanent. Stores you walked past 1,000 times without ever thinking they could disappear. They did. So hit subscribe, because here are 30 discontinued mall stores from the 80s that need to come back. Number 30. Foxmore. If you were a teenage girl in the early 1980s, Foxmore was the store you dragged your mom into every single weekend. They sold trendy clothing at prices that would not empty your babysitting money in one trip. Racks of neon tops, acid-wash denim, and oversized sweaters that hung off one shoulder. The fitting rooms always had a line 3 deep, and the music was loud enough that you could pretend you were shopping alone even when your mother was standing right outside the curtain, holding her purse and checking her watch. Foxmore vanished by the late 1980s, swallowed up by the same fast fashion cycle it helped create. Most people under 40 have never heard of it, but if you shopped there, you remember exactly what those bags looked like. Number 29. Tape World. Every mall had one. A narrow store, usually wedged between a shoe shop and a candle place, with nothing but cassette tapes stacked floor to ceiling in long plastic bins. You would flip through hundreds of them, reading the track listings on the back, trying to decide if an entire album was worth it based on the 2 songs you heard on the radio. The staff behind the counter always had opinions, strong ones, and if they liked your taste, they would point you towards something you had never heard of, something that became your favorite album for the next 6 months. Tape World did not survive the compact disc. By the mid-1990s, the stores were gone, the bins were gone, and the ritual of reading the back of a cassette case under fluorescent lights was over. Number 28. Chess King. This was the store for guys who wanted to look like they belonged in a music video. Skinny leather ties, parachute pants, members-only style jackets, and shirts with collars so wide they could pick up a satellite signal. Chess King leaned hard into whatever trend was happening that exact month. If Miami Vice was on television, the mannequins had pastel blazers by Friday. The store had a very specific smell, a mix of cheap cologne samples and synthetic fabric that hit you 3 steps before the entrance. The salespeople dressed like they were about to go clubbing after their shift. Chess King closed its doors in the mid-1990s. The fashion moved on. But the memory of buying your first dress shirt there, standing in front of that mirror while the salesperson told you it looked great, that stayed. Number 27. Orange Julius. Technically a food stand, but it was as much a part of the mall as any store with a lease. That frothy, creamy orange drink was like nothing else you could get anywhere. The recipe was simple enough. Orange juice blended with ice, sugar, and something that made it impossibly foamy. But the taste was impossible to recreate at home no matter how many times you tried. You would stand there at that little counter, leaning on the orange formica, sipping through a straw while you watched people walk by with their shopping bags. Your mom would hand you $2 and you would nurse that drink for the next 45 minutes. Orange Julius locations have mostly disappeared from American malls today, and no smoothie chain has ever come close to what they had. Number 26. Service Merchandise. This store confused every kid who walked into it. You did not browse shelves and pick things up like a normal shop. Instead, you looked at items behind glass display cases, wrote down a number on a little slip of paper, handed it to someone at the counter, and then waited while your item came sliding out on a conveyor belt from somewhere in the back. It felt like ordering from the future. Service Merchandise sold jewelry, electronics, housewares, and toys all through that catalog system. Your parents would spend what felt like hours filling out those little slips while you pressed your face against the glass cases staring at watches you could not afford. The chain closed in the early 2000s, but that conveyor belt moment, seeing your item appear on the rollers and slide toward you, stayed with everyone who experienced it. Number 25. Woolworths. This was not just a store. It was an institution. Woolworths had been around since the late 1800s. And by the 1980s, it was one of those places that felt like it had always existed and always would. The lunch counter alone was worth the trip. You would sit on those round stools that spun if you pushed off with your feet, order a grilled cheese or a hot dog, and watch the woman behind the counter move with a speed and efficiency that would put most modern restaurants to shame. She knew every order before you finished saying it. The store itself was a wonderland of cheap, useful things. Sewing kits in little plastic cases, goldfish in bags hanging on a rack by the register, greeting cards for every occasion, penny candy in open bins where you scooped your own with a tiny metal shovel and put it in a paper bag they weighed at the counter. Your grandmother could spend an entire afternoon in Woolworths and come out with a bag full of things she did not need but absolutely had to have. The pet department had parakeets in cages and hamsters running on wheels behind glass, and every kid pressed their face against it until their parents pulled them away. Woolworths closed its last American stores in 1997, and when it went, it took an entire way of shopping with it. The lunch counter, the goldfish, the penny candy, all of it gone in one sweep. The toy section had bins of plastic soldiers and bags of marbles that cost almost nothing. The cosmetics counter had lipstick samples your older sister tested on the back of her hand. Every aisle had something unexpected, and you never walked out with what you came in for. Nothing has replaced the experience of wandering a Woolworths with no plan and no hurry, just seeing what caught your eye. Number 24. Kinney shoes. Before every mall had 3 different athletic shoe stores competing for the same customer, Kinney was the place your family went for shoes. All of them. School shoes, church shoes, sneakers, sandals, winter boots. The salesperson would measure your foot on that cold metal sliding device, disappear into the back room, and come out carrying a stack of boxes so tall they could barely see over the top. You sat on those low benches while your mom held up options and your dad checked the price sticker on the bottom. The carpet was always that dark industrial pattern designed to hide scuff marks from hundreds of kids running between the aisles. Kinney closed in the late 1990s, and with it went the idea of a single-family shoe store where one stop covered everyone from grandpa to the toddler. Number 23. Camelot Music. Sam Goody got more attention, but Camelot Music was the record store that a lot of malls actually had. The walls were lined with posters you could buy, and the listening stations had headphones so greasy from the last 100 people that you wiped them on your shirt before putting them on. You could spend an hour in Camelot just reading liner notes and looking at album art, turning the case over in your hands like it was a book. The bargain bin near the front was dangerous territory because you would always find something for a couple of dollars that you did not need but could not leave behind. Camelot Music closed in the early 2000s after merging with other chains, and the simple ritual of flipping through a rack of CDs in a store that smelled like cardboard and plastic wrap vanished with it. Number 22. Merry-Go-Round. If Chess King was for the guys, Merry-Go-Round was its louder, flashier neighbor doing the same thing from a slightly different angle. The music was pumping, the neon signage glowed from across the concourse, and the clothing racks were packed so tight you could barely squeeze between them without knocking something off. Merry-Go-Round sold the kind of outfits you wore once to a school dance and then shoved to the back of your closet. Bold prints, oversized earrings, shoes with buckles that served absolutely no structural purpose. The company expanded fast through the 1980s and collapsed just as fast in the mid-1990s, filing for bankruptcy. Hundreds of stores closed almost overnight, and the neon signs went dark. Number 21. Walden Books. Tucked into a modest storefront, usually near the food court, Walden Books packed an astonishing number of titles into a small space. The shelves went almost to the ceiling, and the staff could tell you exactly where to find a book, even when there was no logical reason they should know that. The children's section in the back had a little step stool and a spinner rack of Goosebumps and choose-your-own-adventure books that could keep a kid occupied while their parents shopped for an hour. You would sit on the floor, cross-legged, reading the first chapter of something you could not afford to buy, and nobody told you to stop. Walden Books closed its remaining locations in 2011, and with it went one of the last reasons to accidentally discover a book you were not looking for. Number 20. County seat, jeans. That was the entire point. County seat sold denim the way a bakery sells bread. Levi's, Jordache, Guess, Wrangler, all stacked on shelves by size and cut, with the labels facing out so you could find your brand without asking. You walked in knowing exactly what you wanted, or the salesperson talked you into trying a cut you had never considered, and you walked out with something completely different. The fitting room mirror had that slightly warm lighting that made everything look better than it would look at home under the bathroom bulb. County seat was a casualty of the 1990s retail shakeout, and the dedicated jean shopping experience scattered across department store basement floors and big box retailers where nobody knew your size. Number 19. KB Toys. Now we are in the dangerous part of the mall, the part where kids lost their minds and parents lost their wallets. KB Toys was smaller than a Toys R Us, but that was the magic of it. Everything was crammed together in a space barely bigger than a living room, which meant every direction you looked there was something you needed immediately. The action figures were at eye level for a 7-year-old, positioned so you could grab them without asking for help. The board games were stacked on the top shelf where you had to get an adult involved, and the bins near the register, filled with rubber balls, slinkies, and little plastic animals, were the final trap before checkout. You could not walk past them without grabbing something. Your parents knew it. The store absolutely knew it. The layout was designed so that the path to the exit went directly past the most tempting displays in the entire store. At Christmas, KB Toys was something else entirely. The boxes were stacked to the ceiling, the aisles were shoulder to shoulder with parents trying to find the one toy their kid circled in the catalog, and there was a low hum of electronic demo toys going off from every direction. You could hear the store from the hallway. KB Toys filed for bankruptcy and closed its stores in the late 2000s. Nothing online has ever matched the sensory overload of standing in that store surrounded by every toy you had ever wanted, knowing you could only pick one. No website can recreate the weight of a box in your hands, the sound of the register, or the look on your face walking out of that store holding a bag that was almost as big as you were. Number 18. Contempo Casuals. Another fashion chain aimed at young women, but Contempo Casuals had a slightly edgier reputation than the others. The clothes were tighter, the colors were louder, and the accessories were bolder. You could walk in with your paycheck from your part-time job and walk out with a complete outfit for a night out, shoes included, and still have money left for food court pizza. The jewelry counter near the front was irresistible, rows of cheap earrings and bangles displayed under glass like they were precious stones. Contempo Casuals closed in the early 2000s, and the specific combination of affordable and just daring enough that it offered never quite got replicated by anyone else. Number 17. Hickory Farms. Every holiday season, Hickory Farms appeared in the mall like clockwork. A temporary kiosk loaded with summer sausages, cheese logs, mustard jars, and gift baskets wrapped in cellophane with big red bows. The sample trays were the real draw. Little cubes of cheese on toothpicks and tiny slices of sausage that you could circle back for 2 or 3 times if you were subtle about it. Your dad always ended up buying a gift box for someone at work, and half the time he ate most of it in the car on the way home before it ever got wrapped. Hickory Farms still exists online today, but the mall kiosk experience with its free samples and its holiday chaos is mostly a memory now. Number 16. Wicks and Sticks, the candle store. Every mall had one, and it smelled exactly the way you think it did. Rows and rows of taper candles, jar candles, novelty candles shaped like animals and fruit, and those long, thin tapers your mom bought for the dining room table she only set on holidays. The store was kept dark on purpose, so the flickering display candles created this warm, cave-like atmosphere that made you forget you were standing in a shopping mall between a Radio Shack and a pretzel place. You could spend 10 minutes in there just breathing. Wicks and Sticks closed in the 2000s. Candle stores still exist, but none of them had that same feeling of walking into a quiet, glowing room in the middle of a noisy mall. Number 15. B. Dalton Bookseller, Walden Book's main rival. If your mall did not have one, it had the other, and some malls had both within walking distance. B. Dalton felt slightly more polished. The bestseller table was front and center with clean stacks, and the staff recommendations were handwritten on little index cards taped to the shelves. You could pick up a paperback for a couple of dollars and finish it on the couch before your next trip to the mall. B. Dalton closed its last stores in the early 2000s, one more casualty of the shift to buying books with a mouse click instead of a conversation with a bookseller who actually read the thing they were recommending. Number 14. Montgomery Ward. Walking into a Montgomery Ward felt like stepping into a store that could not quite decide what it wanted to be, and that was the beauty of it. One floor had refrigerators and washing machines lined up like soldiers. Another had clothing on racks sorted by season. There was a jewelry counter with a woman who called everyone Han, a tire center around the back, a furniture showroom where every couch had a price tag dangling from the armrest, and somewhere in the back corner a catalog desk where you could order things they did not even carry in the store. Montgomery Ward had been a part of American retail since the 1800s. Your great-grandparents ordered from the Montgomery Ward catalog before cars were common on most roads. By the 1980s, the stores were massive anchors at the ends of shopping malls, and families would plan entire Saturday afternoons around a trip there. Your mom disappeared into the curtain section. Your dad priced out a new lawnmower. You sat in the furniture department pretending the display living rooms were your first apartment, picking up the fake fruit on the coffee table and putting it back. The chain struggled through the 1990s as competition closed in from every side, and it shut down for good in the early 2000s. When Montgomery Ward went dark, it left enormous empty spaces in malls across the country. Some of those spaces sat vacant for years. A few have never been filled at all. You drive past, and you can still picture the Montgomery Ward sign hanging above doors that are now boarded up. The parking lot is cracked, the store is gone, but the memory of spending a whole afternoon there with your family, that is still right where you left it. Number 13. Hot Sam Pretzels. Before Auntie Anne's took over every food court in the country, Hot Sam was the pretzel place. A little stand near the escalators with a glass case full of warm, salted pretzels turning slowly under a heat lamp. The mustard came in those tiny plastic cups, and you always needed two because the first one ran out halfway through. The pretzels were dense and chewy in a way that modern mall pretzels simply do not match. You could smell Hot Sam from 2 stores away, and that smell alone was enough to derail whatever your parents had planned next. Hot Sam eventually rebranded and faded out, replaced by competitors with bigger menus. But the original taste, salty, warm, and exactly right, was something you either remember or you do not. Number 12. Casual Corner. Your mom shopped here. Maybe your aunt, too. Casual Corner sold women's professional clothing, the kind of blazers, skirts, and blouses that a woman wore to work at a bank or an insurance office in the 1980s. The displays were always neat, the hangers evenly spaced, and the fitting rooms had actual doors instead of curtains, which felt luxurious by mall standards. The staff greeted you when you walked in and actually remembered what size you bought last time. Casual Corner closed in 2004, and the very specific market it served, affordable, no-nonsense office wear for working women who did not want to spend department store prices, scattered into clearance racks and online catalogs. Number 11. Circus World, a toy store with a circus theme, which meant the entrance had a big red and white striped awning and the whole inside felt like a carnival that happened to sell merchandise. Circus World carried toys, games, and stuffed animals, but the decorations were what made it different from every other toy store. Clown faces painted on the walls, bright primary colors on every surface, and display cases built to look like circus wagons. For a 5-year-old walking through that entrance for the first time, it was overwhelming in the best possible way. Circus World did not survive past the early 1990s. The chain was absorbed into other toy retailers, and the circus awnings came down, leaving plain storefronts behind. Number 10. Sam Goody, the big one. Sam Goody was the music store that every serious music buyer gravitated toward. The selection was enormous: vinyl records, cassette tapes, compact discs, and eventually DVDs, all organized in long rows with alphabetical dividers you could flip through with one hand. The staff were music obsessives who could debate the best album of any decade without taking a breath. The listening stations had headphones and a row of featured albums you could preview before committing your money. Walking into a Sam Goody with birthday money in your pocket was one of the great small pleasures of being a teenager in the 1980s. You knew you were walking out with something. The only question was, what? Sam Goody closed its remaining stores in the mid-2000s, and the ritual of physically browsing music, of holding an album in your hands before you bought it, went with it. Number 9. Tom McCann. Another shoe store, but Tom McCann had a more working-class reputation. These were the shoes your dad wore to the plant, and the ones you got for school because they were built to last and priced to be replaced when they finally gave out. The leather was stiff and had that new shoe smell that took weeks to break in. You would walk around the house in them for days trying to soften them up before wearing them outside. Tom McCann shoes were not fashionable. They were not trying to be. They were practical, solid, and there was a time when that was more than enough. The brand left American malls by the late 1990s, and the idea of a shoe store built entirely around durability instead of style went with it. Number 8. Children's Palace. If KB Toys was the small, intense toy store, Children's Palace was the sprawling empire. The stores were huge, often standalone buildings near the mall rather than inside it, with that castle facade on the front that made every kid in the back seat start bouncing the second they spotted it from the parking lot. Inside, the aisles were wide and the shelves were tall, and the bike section alone was bigger than most entire stores in the mall. You could ride a big wheel up and down the aisle if nobody was watching. Children's Palace closed in the early 1990s, but that castle entrance, those turrets rising up from a strip mall parking lot, lives on in the memory of every kid who walked through the drawbridge doors. Number 7. Lerner, New York. Later known by a different name before it transformed entirely, the original Lerner stores were a staple of 1980s malls from coast to coast. They sold affordable women's fashion with a New York City edge, at least that was what the branding promised. The window displays always featured mannequins in coordinated outfits that looked like they belonged on a magazine cover, even though the price tags told a completely different story. Your older sister probably shopped here when she got her first real job and needed something that looked professional without costing a week's pay. The original Lerner stores eventually rebranded and restructured over the decades, but that specific version of the store, with its mix of aspiration and accessibility, is long gone from the American mall. Number 6. National Record Mart. Regional, yes, but if your mall had one, you remember it. National Record Mart served the same purpose as Sam Goody and Camelot Music, but with a scrappier, more local feel. The inventory was denser, the prices were a little lower, and the staff were the kind of people who taped handwritten reviews to the new release shelf because they genuinely wanted you to hear what they heard. For music fans across the Mid-Atlantic and parts of the Midwest, National Record Mart was the first place you went on release day. You stood outside waiting for the doors to open. The chain closed in the early 2000s, absorbed into a larger company, and a lot of neighborhoods lost their only dedicated music store. Number 5. Venture, a Midwest institution. Venture was a discount department store that anchored malls and shopping centers across Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, and surrounding states. It was not glamorous. The lighting was flat fluorescent, the floors were scuffed tile, and the clothing section smelled like new polyester off the bolt. But Venture had everything: toys, hardware, garden supplies, clothing, housewares, school supplies, and a snack bar near the front where you could get a hot dog and a slushie while your mom compared dish soap prices. Venture closed in 1998, and for people who grew up in the Midwest, it left a gap in their Saturday routine that no Target or Walmart has ever fully filled. There was something about Venture that was just yours. Number 4. Ups and Downs. If you were between 12 and 17 in the mid-1980s, Ups and Downs was your store. It sold trendy teen fashion at prices that matched what a teenager could actually afford, and the music pumping through the speakers was always whatever sat at #1 on the charts that week. The store leaned hard into the junior market. Graphic tees, stirrup pants, jelly shoes, and accessories that changed with every season and sometimes faster than that. You would go in with your friends after school, try things on, buy one thing, and feel like you had accomplished something important. Ups and Downs did not last long. The chain closed by the early 1990s, but for the brief window it existed, it was the store where a lot of American teenagers figured out their personal style for the first time. Number 3. Caldor. A Northeast chain that went head-to-head with Bradley's and Ames, Caldor was the discount store your family piled into when you needed everything and did not want to drive to 3 different places. School supplies in August, winter coats in October, Christmas decorations the day after Thanksgiving, and clearance bins year-round that always had something worth digging through. The electronics section had boom boxes you could actually test by pressing the buttons, and the toy aisle was positioned so that kids would find it no matter which entrance the family used. Caldor closed in 1999 after filing for bankruptcy. For families across New England and the Mid-Atlantic, it was the end of a store that had been part of their routine for decades. Number 2. Ames. Small-town America's department store. If you did not live near a major mall, Ames was probably your go-to for just about everything. It sat in strip malls and smaller shopping centers across the East Coast, and it had a loyal, almost fierce following in rural and suburban communities. Ames was not fancy. The aisles were narrow, the lighting was harsh, and the inventory was practical rather than exciting. But it was yours. It was the store where your town shopped, where your neighbors worked, where you ran into people you knew in every single aisle. Ames closed in 2002, and when it did, some smaller towns lost their only real department store. The parking lot sat empty for years. Number 1. Hills. If you grew up anywhere near the Rust Belt or Appalachia, Hills was your store. Not Kmart, not Caldor. Hills. The big blue sign on the outside of the building was a landmark in dozens of small and mid-sized towns from Pennsylvania to Ohio to West Virginia. Inside, Hills had a little bit of everything. Clothing, garden hoses, record albums, goldfish in bags, toys piled on end caps, and a layaway counter at the back where your mom started putting Christmas presents on hold every September. And the cafeteria. Yes, Hills had a cafeteria. It served the kind of simple, no-nonsense food that tasted better than it had any right to. Grilled cheese, a bowl of soup, and a fountain drink while you sat at a table and watched the other shoppers go by. Hills was bought out and absorbed in the late 1990s. The blue signs came down, the cafeterias closed, and the communities that had built their weekend routines around a trip to Hills felt that loss in a way that is hard to explain to anyone who did not grow up with it. 30 stores. 30 pieces of a world that does not exist anymore. If any of these names took you back to a Saturday afternoon you had almost forgotten, drop a comment and tell us which store you missed the most. Which one did your family shop at every single weekend? And if you know someone who spent their teenage years in those hallways, send this their way. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next one. Thanks for watching.